the International Space Station, our home away from home up there in orbit,
Mm-hmm.
it's been going strong for decades now.
Yeah.
But, let's be real. Those decades are really starting to show.
Yeah.
Some parts are over 30 years old.
I know. It's incredible, isn't it?
It really is. And with all the talk about Russia and everything going on there,
Yeah.
it definitely feels like we're at a real turning point for humans in space.
Yeah. Definitely a turning point.
What do you think?
Absolutely. And I think, this
Yeah.
isn't just about like swapping out some old hardware.
Right.
We're talking about a like fundamental change in how we even approach low Earth orbit,
Okay.
with NASA kind of making this bold bet on the private sector to kind of take over.
Right. NASA's Commercial LEO Destinations Program,
Yeah.
CLD as they call it.
CLD, exactly.
The idea being that instead of building the next space station themselves, they're turning to companies like Blue Origin, Nanoracks, Axiom Space to kind of take the lead.
Exactly. And I think that's where things get really, really interesting.
Okay.
Because, relying on private companies to create something
Yeah.
as complex and as critical as a space station,
Right.
it comes with its own set of challenges and risks.
Well, I mean, we've already seen some of those risks kind of play out.
Yeah.
Axiom Space has hit a few snags, haven't they?
They have. They've faced some financial headwinds, I think,
Yeah.
which has led to delays in their timeline.
Right.
And then there's the case of Northrop Grumman.
Yeah.
They were initially on board with this, but ultimately decided to drop out, stating that their business case couldn't be closed.
Could not close. That's a pretty strong statement.
Yeah.
What kind of message do you think that sends to other companies that might be considering joining CLD?
Well, I think it certainly raises questions about the financial viability of these private space stations.
Right.
Without a clear path to profitability,
Hmm.
it's going to be very difficult to attract and retain the kind of investment needed to make this vision a reality.
And let's not forget, the clock is ticking.
The clock is definitely ticking.
The ISS is slated for retirement around 2030.
Yeah.
Can these companies really pull off something this ambitious on such a tight time frame?
That is the billion-dollar question, literally. And it's interesting you say that because, there was a 2017 report that actually questioned the market demand for these private stations
Really?
beyond government use.
Wow.
So,
Cool.
without what they call like a killer app for space,
Okay.
like some groundbreaking application
Right.
that makes a space station indispensable.
Mhm.
It's unclear how these companies will actually make a profit.
So it's not even just about building these stations.
No.
It's about building them, and then on top of that, finding a way to make them commercially viable, which is a whole other challenge.
Exactly. And I think, NASA kind of envisions this future
Okay.
where they're just one of many customers
Okay.
sharing these stations with other countries, private companies, maybe even tourists. Who knows? But right now, I think that future is far from certain.
Okay, so we've got companies taking on this massive, massive technological challenge.
Huge.
We've got this incredibly tight deadline.
Yeah.
And we have all this uncertainty about the future demand. And on top of all that,
Yeah.
I have to ask,
Yeah.
is NASA truly committed to this?
That's the other question.
Yeah. Have they really put their money where their mouth is when it comes to funding CLD?
Yeah.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Let's look at the numbers.
Yeah.
In 2019, NASA requested $150 million for CLD,
Right.
but they only received $40 million.
Yeah. A little bit of a difference there.
That's a pretty big difference.
Yeah.
I mean, more than half.
Yeah.
And that pattern, unfortunately has continued, right?
It has, yeah. I mean, if you look at the numbers between 2019 and 2026,
Right.
their total request was just over $1.3 billion.
Okay.
But they were only allocated around $650 million.
Wow. Okay, so they're getting less than half of what they're actually asking for.
Less than half.
That does not scream like top priority from where I'm sitting.
No, it really doesn't. And especially when you consider that $650 million over 5 years
Right.
is like a drop in the bucket compared to some of NASA's other like big budget projects,
Right.
Like it really makes you wonder about their level of commitment to this whole commercial space station endeavor.
It does. It really does.
Yeah.
And it brings up another kind of concern I have, right?
Yeah.
We've talked about the possibility of these private stations just not being ready in time. What happens then? Then we're left with this gap,
Yeah.
this period of time where the U.S. has no continuous presence in low Earth orbit.
Yeah.
What are the implications of that?
It's a significant concern because, the U.S. has kind of been the leader in space exploration for decades now.
So long.
And a gap in our presence, I think, would have, pretty significant repercussions.
Right.
It could impact, scientific research, international partnerships,
Sure.
even our national prestige.
Wow. Yeah.
It's a big deal.
Yeah. Are there any backup plans? Like, what happens if 2030 rolls around
Right.
and these commercial stations just aren't ready?
Yeah, it's a good question. There have been some ideas kind of floated around. One suggestion that I've heard involves using existing spacecraft.
Okay.
Like, for example, SpaceX's Crew Dragon
Like,
or Boeing's Starliner as kind of a stopgap measure.
you mean those, like, capsules that they use to, like,
Exactly.
ferry astronauts to and from the ISS?
Exactly.
Could those really function as, like, even temporary space stations?
I mean, they would be a far cry from a fully functional space station.
Right.
That
Of course.
they lack the space
Yeah.
and the resources for long-term habitation and research, right?
Sure.
But they could potentially at least,
Okay.
provide a temporary foothold in low Earth orbit
Okay.
and ensure that, the U.S. maintains at least some presence there.
Okay, so not ideal,
Not ideal,
but better than nothing.
better than nothing.
Right. I mean, this whole situation makes you wonder,
Yeah.
should NASA just cut its losses and just build their own replacement to the ISS
Yeah.
if you want something done right?
I mean, it's not quite that simple.
Okay.
There are valid arguments on both sides.
Okay.
I think, some people argue that a space station is such a critical
Yes.
national asset
Right.
that it should remain solely in the hands of NASA,
Okay.
free from, the commercial pressures that private companies face.
Right, because a private company's priority is ultimately to,
Exactly.
their own bottom line,
Their bottom line. Exactly.
which might not always align with kind of these broader goals of
Exactly.
space exploration and the advancement of science and technology.
100%.
Right, I get that.
Yeah. But then, on the other hand,
Yeah.
NASA doesn't exactly have a stellar track record when it comes to,
Right.
delivering these big, complex projects on time and within budget.
Yeah, James Webb Space Telescope, right.
Exactly.
Years of delays.
Years of delays, billions of dollars.
Billions and billions of dollars in cost overruns.
Exactly. And let's not forget,
Yeah.
NASA's budget is constantly under
Of course.
scrutiny.
Of course, yeah.
Right. So taking on another massive construction project,
Yeah.
like a new space station, it would be, it'd be a huge financial gamble.
So it seems like kind of a catch-22.
It really does.
The valid concerns about relying on private companies, but we have concerns about NASA's ability to, shoulder this burden on their own.
Exactly.
So where does that leave us?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one.
We've talked about all the risks,
Yeah.
the financial uncertainty, the tight timeline,
Mm-hmm.
NASA's, kind of questionable commitment to this whole thing.
Yeah.
With all that in mind,
Mhm.
why are we even considering commercial space stations?
Right.
What are the potential upsides here?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really easy to get kind of bogged down in
Yeah.
all the what ifs and the potential downsides.
Yeah.
But there are some compelling arguments in favor of these commercial space stations, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think one of the most significant potential benefits is,
Yeah.
cost effectiveness. Right. By shifting the responsibility of actually building and launching these things to the private sector,
Right.
NASA can free up, its own resources to pursue other, ambitious missions.
So instead of pouring billions and billions of dollars into building another ISS,
Exactly.
they're basically just a customer
Exactly.
purchasing services from these commercial providers as needed.
Exactly. It's about, leveraging
Yeah.
the innovation and the efficiency of the private sector. I mean,
Yeah.
think about the evolution we've seen with commercial spaceflight already, right?
Right.
Companies like SpaceX have already significantly
Unbelievable.
driven down the cost of launching payloads and people into orbit.
That's a great point, yeah. SpaceX has really shaken things up, and they've proven that private companies can compete with and even outperform
Yeah,
government agencies when it comes to certain areas of space exploration. So
100%.
that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Are there other potential benefits beyond
Oh, yeah.
just the cost savings?
Absolutely. I think,
Yeah.
perhaps the most exciting aspect of kind of this whole shift towards commercial space stations is the potential for
Okay.
groundbreaking innovation.
Okay, now you've got me really intrigued.
Yeah.
What kind of innovations are we talking about here? Like, give me some examples.
That's the exciting part. We don't know yet,
Okay.
right? I mean, think back to like the early days of the internet,
Okay.
right? No one could have predicted
Right.
like the rise of e-commerce, social media, streaming services.
Right.
All these things became possible because the infrastructure was put in place.
Yeah.
And then innovation followed.
Okay, so you're saying that
Yeah.
these commercial space stations could be kind of
It
like
could be like the exact
the internet of low Earth orbit,
100%.
paving the way for this whole new era of
Exactly.
space-based industries.
Exactly. I mean, we're already seeing like the early stages of this with,
Okay.
companies exploring like in-space manufacturing, asteroid mining, even like space-based solar power.
Wow.
These are all like
Yeah.
potentially game-changing technologies.
It's an exciting prospect, no doubt,
Yeah.
but with all the challenges that we've discussed,
Yeah.
is it really feasible? I mean, is NASA's vision of this, like
Yeah.
thriving commercial space ecosystem,
Yeah.
really within reach?
It's a tough one to answer. I mean, the future is always uncertain, right?
Right.
I think the next few years are going to be absolutely critical
Right.
in determining, the success of this whole endeavor.
Okay.
If these companies can overcome kind of these technical and financial hurdles,
Hmm.
and if NASA can, kind of get their act together and secure adequate funding and provide a clear vision for this whole thing,
Yeah.
then yeah, this could be a truly transformative moment for human space exploration.
So a lot is riding on this.
A lot is riding on this.
It sounds like really the future of like human presence in space might hinge on whether these commercial space stations succeed or fail.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pivotal moment, right?
Yeah.
The decisions that are made in the next few years are gonna have a ripple effect for decades to come, and it raises, I think, a really profound question for all of us.
Yeah.
What role will we play in shaping that future?
It is a question worth pondering.
Yeah,
This deep dive has given us a lot to consider.
a lot.
The challenges, the risks, but also these incredible potential benefits.
And the benefits are huge.
And hopefully it's, sparked some curiosity for our listeners out there.
Absolutely.
Maybe even inspired some new ideas about what the future of space exploration could and should look like.
100%, yeah.
Absolutely. On that note,
Yeah.
I think we'll have to leave this conversation here for now. To all our listeners out there, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the future of space stations, a future that is still being written as we speak.
A future that we can all be a part of shaping.
Absolutely. Thanks again.